Good
Yes,
morning.
sir.
I appreciate you taking some time this morning to join the Real American Dream podcast, where I believe the American dream is still alive and well. And that's specifically because of the stories, the inspirational stories I hear on this podcast from first generation immigrants as yourself. So thanks for joining this morning.
Of course, of course. My pleasure.
Absolutely. So Hosh, maybe you can start with, your full name, when you were born, and country of origin.
I will. So my full name is Hashem. That's my first name. My middle name is Mehrdad, and my last name is Hashemian. So when I came to the United States and went to nuclear engineering department head office, he said, "What's your name?" I said, "My name is Hashem Hashemian." He said, "That's too hard to say. I'm just going to call you Hosh." So from there on out, 45 years ago, maybe 47 years ago, my name has been Hosh. So it's Hosh
Okay.
Hashemian.
Okay, very cool. And then
And,
go ahead.
and I came from Iran. So I was born in Iran. I came here in 1950. I came here when I was 24 years old. And I came to the United States like most other Iranian students to go to graduate school. I already had a bachelor's degree in physics. I wanted to get a master's degree or PhD in electrical engineering and go back to Iran. But the rest, I guess you're going to ask me a question and I'll answer those later.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe a good place to start, Hosh, is, growing up in Iran before you left, just give us kind of the state of the country, give us a better understanding of all things Iran before you left.
Right. So Iran, during the time that I was growing up, was under the government of the Shah of Iran, which was later deposed, and a new government came, and it really was paradise. I mean, everything was great. The country was really thriving and doing fantastic. We really liked it. Shah had a lot of people that didn't like what he did and how he did it. My dad included. My dad was not in favor of Shah, and he probably one of the I would say well-educated people among the educated people that opposed the Shah. But my generation mostly did not have any problem with it, and so. But and of course, Iran is still very good now, in spite of what you hear on and see. Iran is a extremely well-functioning country. I mean, the infrastructure is extremely strong. The population are not used to being very organized. So we are not used to standing in lines and waiting our turns habitually. That's just a thing. So it's a little bit chaotic. We are not used to driving in our line. We like to try to do things that crossing the street is just an art in Iran.
Yeah.
But if you ignore all of that and you go there today and you understand that that's the way this place has always been, you really can't see a whole lot of difference between the way it was before, in my opinion. Of course, there are Iranians who really would not say that to you, and they think the new government is not doing a good job. I'm not very political with the Iranian politics, but I really don't think there's anything bad that is very visible compared to what it was before. So
Yeah.
that's the way things are.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't, admittedly, Hosh, I don't know a tremendous amount about Iran. And, a lot of that is probably because of, a lot of that is probably because, number one, me taking the time to do the appropriate amount of research to understand it better, but also, what we know is generally what we hear from all of our media outlets. So yeah, to me, if there's so much that I don't know, it's interesting to have you on the podcast to give us a little insight. So Shah, and forgive me as I'm learning, but Shah, I'm assuming that's not a form of government. That's an individual, I'm
He
assuming.
was a king. Shah, the
Okay.
word Shah means king.
Okay.
So he was the king.
Okay. So you grew up where essentially, I don't know if it would be considered a monarchy necessarily, but
Correct. It was.
okay,
It
it
was.
was. Okay.
That's how you would term it. Correct.
Okay. And then, how long were you in Iran where is that form of government.
So I was the whole time. So when I
Okay.
came to United States, Iran was still under the Shah in 1974. The government changed in 1979.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and I think I actually am somewhat aware of that. So maybe help us understand, if you can, what that change looked like and how the government changed, and what is
So,
government today in Iran.
right. So the Shah has some opponents and some proponents. So a lot of I would say intellectual people, including, as I said, my own father, were kind of not really in favor of Shah and that kind of government. They wanted a government like the United States, right, where you have elections and the top guy or top person is elected every so often and so on. So they really were in favor of the Western way of doing things. And there were some other people, very minority group, that were active in trying to promote communism. So the Shah kept things together reasonably well, but him and his family did stuff that, in retrospect, I think caused them the popularity problem that really gave rise to people coming. It was a very, very peaceful change of the government. I mean, there was some chaos and some issues, but so the uprising started, I think, in 1978, and people would just come to the street and walk and give talks and promote the change of the government. And we had so Iran is a Muslim country, Shia Muslim, and we also have very strong religious people, conservative religious people. And so all the groups were there, opposing the Shah. And then Shah also had people who liked him, but they ended up not being able to make a big difference during the time that people were uprising against the Shah. Therefore, so the religious people, the intellectual, and religious people are also intellectual, obviously, but the intellectuals or the people like my dad, and then we have the general public, that the groups that were against the Shah. And then we had a small group of people, including the Shah's government itself and his family, and people like me, were not against the Shah. Mm-hmm. However, I think the religious group and those who were promoting more conservative government win over. We had a religious leader called Ayatollah Khomeini that was actually deposed by the Shah, and not deposed, exiled by the Shah. Mm-hmm. And then he was the one that was the leader of the religious revolution sort of thing, and that group actually won the debate, right? And Ayatollah Khomeini Shah was not able to keep it together because it became chaotic. There wasn't any killing or any of that stuff. It was a sort of a velvet revolution sort of things. But the Shah left on his own, thinking that, well, I'm not wanted here anymore. So he went to Egypt. With Anwar Sadat was a good friend of the Shah, so he accepted him. And then the Ayatollah Khomeini came to Iran, and then the Iran instituted a more conservative, pretty conservative religious government based mostly on modern Islamic law. These things you hear on TV, that it is like, Sharia law is this and that and the other, that is really true with the way things are there. Yes, they are conservative. They ask the women to wear scarves, and those things don't show. But it is not like Islam has some elements that are pretty radical and all, but those are not in Iran, and they are actually a very small minority that do a lot of bad stuff and give us a hugely bad name, but mm-hmm. That's the way things are. And actually, if you look at it, a lot of people disagree with me, but if you look at it, things change pretty peacefully and without killing and all that. And the government came in. They were, of course, new, but very quickly they just put everything together. And even though it was a little bit, different, but it just worked. And now a lot of people don't like either the Shah or this, but I have seen both, and I think both were reasonably operating fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've had several on this podcast who have been through similar revolutions, changing government, and I think almost all of them weren't peaceful. Generally, kind of the old form of government doesn't leave in a peaceful manner. I mean, they generally still want to have power, control. So that's interesting. That's different than what I'm used to, the stories I've heard where there's been changing government.
Right.
It's unique.
No, ours was pretty peaceful, and there's a lot of different opinions about the previous government versus the new government. Now, there is some activities. The son of the Shah of Iran, the king came to Egypt, and then he was going to come to the United States because he had cancer, and they wanted him to be treated in the United States. He was a very good friend of the United States, and the United States was in the verge of accepting him. And then the Iranian government, the new government that the people who were in power didn't like that. So then the hostages were taken in the American embassy to prevent the better treatment of the Shah in here. And that just created a lot of chaos and a lot of bad blood between the United States and Iran, which is still lingering, because the Iranians went to American embassy and took the embassy and took the American embassy workers as hostage. And that lasted for 444 days, sort of thing, till Reagan came. And that has been something that really made the United States pretty, I wouldn't say enemies, but not good friends.
Yeah, so that's where it started. Yeah, I think I've seen documentaries and movies on that situation.
Right.
That was the Jimmy Carter presidency, I believe, right? And then
right, yeah, Jimmy Carter. Well, of course, I think he was probably one of the people that they say that was the reason that the government was able to go from one hand to another. In fact, my dad was a prominent Iranian lawyer. He was a women rights lawyer and also criminal defense lawyer. So he was a very prominent women rights lawyer in Iran, a great intellectual, extremely well educated. And he was here about 2 years into Jimmy Carter's presidency. And he told me, we were sitting in a restaurant in Washington, D.C., and he told me that before Carter's term is over, the Iranian government will fall. He was right.
Wow. So even then, there's a tremendous amount of influence from the United States on Iranian politics, and there's influence back then.
You can say even today, United States has a lot of influence in a lot of places, especially Middle East, and you can look at it two different ways. For some places like this relationship with United Arab Emirates, the one that is growing with the Saudi Arabia, these are the controversial ones in the past, but then United States with Jordan and of course Israel and all those these are all, if you look at all these combination of relationships and things that has happened, is a lot that the United States have had a hand on. The Iran-Iraq war, so when the new government of Iran under Ayatollah Khomeini, the thing is about our Iranian names are not very much like that, but it has happened that we had Ayatollah Khomeini, which is hard to say for you Western people. Khomeini is hard to say, right? But we don't have a lot of last names that are like that, right? But then when Ayatollah Khomeini was gone, the new one that came after him is Ayatollah Khamenei, which is also very hard to say. Yeah. So, and it's kind of similar sounding to that. But when Ayatollah Khomeini came, Saddam Hussein made a huge mistake of attacking Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a religious government, and they can really get the people up to defend the country. So they got in front of, and they pushed Saddam Hussein back, all the way back to his capital, and he started, eating crow and trying to compromise with Iran. And Iran government said no. He offered. I've heard this. This is a hearsay. It may not be accurate, but I heard that Iran was offered $150 billion to back out to original borders, and Ayatollah said, "No, bullshit. You're the one. You're sitting here doing our own thing, and you came here and mess with us. I'm not going to give up that easy." And then Saddam was helped by Western governments and against Iran, and so we were actually pushed back to our original borders. So that took 8 years. 1 million people got killed, and those are the kind of thing that happens in the Middle East that it causes problems.
Yeah, it's interesting. To me, the Middle East is so complex, and it's complicated, and it's hard to kind of understand all the complexities, right? So it's good as you kind of lay this out, it kind of drives a little more clarity. Because I think Americans kind of see it the same way I see it, don't really fully understand the timeline and some of the friction and some of the changes in government, et cetera. So I think that's pretty helpful. So maybe help if you can, like the government today in Iran, is it still structured the same way it was after the Shah left to the new form of government? Is it still the same since 1979? In other words,
no.
Okay.
So if you compare, the Shah was replaced by Ayatollah Khomeini, which basically have supreme power, and Shah had supreme power as well. That was the way the government was set up, and Shah had a prime minister. It was sort of like England, but the prime minister was sort of not elected like the English prime minister is elected by the parliament of England, but it wasn't like that. It was sort of appointed. So Shah decided who will be the prime minister, as opposed to people deciding that mostly. So we had a prime minister that basically was in charge of the day-to-day, but Shah had all the power, all the say-so, and everything else, and he vetoed anything he wanted to veto. So the prime minister was just an executioner of the Shah's will, right? So it's not like England. England, Queen Elizabeth is a head figure, very ceremonial head figure. I happen to like her a lot because I think she's a wonderful lady and has done a lot for her country. But there's a lot of English people that don't like her and think that they're based on money and everything. I don't feel that. But England, Queen is just doesn't call the shots. It's all ceremonial. In Iran, the king was actually calling the shots and everything.
Interesting. So
today's government,
Yeah.
Ayatollah Khamenei, which came after Ayatollah Khomeini, is the supreme commander of Iran, just like Shah was, or like Ayatollah Khomeini was. But there is a government. We have an elected president, and it's actually democratically elected president. Some people argue with that, but I was there. In fact, when the last president of Iran was elected, and I think it was just like here. People went and voted and things. But like everywhere else, people don't get who they want, they raise hell that this was rigged and all those. But I didn't see anything to feel like. In fact, I went to the polls with everybody else, and it was just like here, like you vote here. So we have a president, and then we have a government that is just like here. We have Secretary of State, we have Secretary of Energy, we have all kinds of things, just like the United States, except you have president. We have president in the U.S., and there we have the Ayatollah Khomeini now, and then the government is very similar to here, except the president here do not have supreme power. Um, he's commander-chief and all that, but the Congress has a lot to do with it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the comparison between the two governments.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that was my next question. If you think of how the American founders structured government, there isn't really one centralized point of power that has a lot of power over American people. I mean, it's pretty balanced between the executive branch, the judiciary, and the legislative branch. So there's checks and balances. So in Iran, was there ever like concern from the Iranians that the supreme leader, right, which was outside of government, had too much power and control?
Well, the critics say that. The critics say that we went from Shah's way of doing things, which was Shah had all the power, and now we have the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who has all the power. So there are debates over that. From one hand, you look at United Arab Emirates, right? So they are sort of a monarchy sort of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an extremely progressive country. And I was there. We work in that country. We work in all the countries that have nuclear energy, that's Western technology. So I was talking to this guy. I said, why are they so successful? They're building American nuclear power plants faster and better than we do. He says, because it's very simple. The king makes the decision and everybody follows. There's not all these debates about, like we have here. Look at what's going on in the United States. We are completely divided between conservative and liberal sort of things, right? The Democrats and Republicans, right? Over there, we don't have those kind of issues. The guy says that, and you look at it, United Arab Emirates is like that because the king makes the decision and everybody follows. And happens that they have made very good decisions. The countries, I don't know if you have been to Dubai, but it's one of the most modern, fantastically run place. And everybody say, they use oil money and all. Yes, they do use oil money, but it takes good management to put a country that elegant and that well functioning together. They have an immigration system that's unbelievable compared to the United States. That is a horrible immigration system, as you know. So it has worked. I mean, you have evidence that Saudi Arabia now has a king that's very young. Guy is not even 40 years old, but for his own country and for the benefit of, there are a lot of debate about some of the things he's done, and there are a lot of people who don't like him, but he's driving his country into a very, very modern and well together place.
Yeah.
So it's not proven that those kind of governments where there is one person that called the shots is bad.
Yeah.
And of course, I like the United States system. I think the Constitution of this country is the foundation for all the good thing that's happening here. We have this thing written by those genius people, and then everybody follows that. See, the United States is very dedicated to its Constitution, and there's very little deviation from that. And everybody has fallen in line with that. I mean, nobody debates whether they are Republicans or Democrats or anything about the validity and the beauty and foundation of the Constitution of the United States. And I really think that's really why this country is still on top of the world in spite of these things. I mean, if you look from outside and look at what's going on in the Congress of the United States, you wonder how the hell this country is so good if all these people cannot agree on anything.
Well, I was going to say that's the counter argument, like to your point, back to like having, somewhat of a Shah or supreme leader in some of these other countries in the Middle East. They move faster. You're right. I mean, here in the United States, because of separation of power, the complaint is we move so slowly and nothing gets done, right? So I think that's a very valid argument, in terms of how we operate, where maybe some of these other countries don't, because we are slow. I mean, Congress has got to, not many Americans are too happy with Congress because in their mind, nothing gets done and their approval rating is 18%. So, but
But in reality, Doug, it's not true because I deal with, I mean, I don't deal with Congress, but I know that I'm politically very involved with what's going on. They get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah.
Lamar Alexander, which was our senator here, I happen to know him. I know all of our politicians, several of them as friends, right? And he was saying a lot of time, look at what we've accomplished, but you don't see that. So Congress does a lot of stuff that are positive and good, but people don't see that.
Yeah.
What we see is this bickering against each other and all the stuff that happens. I mean, nothing is perfect, but if you look, I always tell people, look at the results. So I have a business, right? And we have these millennials that come over there and work for 3 or 4 years and leave, which is fine. I mean, you wanted a job, I gave you a job, you didn't like it, you didn't like me. All right, thank you for your thing and go away. We never get into it. But they always have this affinity of going out and getting on the internet and writing a bunch of stuff against you.
Yeah.
To which you say, I understand that I could be a better manager or my management team could be doing a better job. But did you not look at the results? We are a super profitable company. Our infrastructure are amazing. I mean, if you walk around, anybody, even the governor that come, look at it, is amazing. Everybody who audits us, and we get a lot of audit because we don't look, is saying that we've never seen a place function this well. And then they don't see that. They see the fact that, that coffee maker was not working for 3 days and the management did not fix that or some bullshit like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's all fair. Hey, so Hash, if we can, let's go back a little bit in your story. This is all great stuff, by the way. So what year, I guess growing up in Iran, what was your perception of the United States? What did you know about the country? And
so no, even then and now, the perception of the Iranian public of the United States is even better than the United States people themselves. So everybody loves the United States at that time more so than now. Loves to come here. And so there is no love lost between the public of Iran and the United States and the United States people, right? So almost any Iranian you talk to and give the offer, would you like to come to the United States? He'll say yes. So I would dare to say even some of the people who run the government. So the government of Iran and the government of the United States have not seen eye to eye. And it started with the hostage taking and what happens during the original years of the new government. But if you look at it, Derek, in all fairness, I mean, Iran is one of the most stable countries, even today, in the middle of all these problems in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, the dispute between Arabs and Israel and all that kind of stuff. Now, Iran people, it's always historically have been, talking negatively about Israel and Israel about Iran. But even that, I mean, we are hearing some stuff in the news today that, it's really getting bad and all. But we've been hearing these things for years and years and years. So, but if you look at it, Iran is pretty stable. All this terrorism that you see everywhere, Iran is pretty, out of it. There is some examples that the Iranian government have done some stuff, but there is no proof of that. So, I mean, this is a place that's sitting there doing its own thing, mostly, right? And during Obama government, Iran and the United States got into this agreement that was then canceled. And also things were getting better, actually. But it went back to the way it was. But Iran and the United States are talking to each other today about the Iran nuclear deal. So it's during the Shah, it was love relationship. This government, it has been a love-hate relationship sort of thing.
So no, that's helpful. So so look, you growing up in Iran, you had your perception of what you thought of the United States. It sounded very positive,
Very positive.
and then ultimately, when did you come to the United States? How old were you? And
I
then,
was 24 years old.
okay, so you're 24 years old, and then, why the United States? Why not? You left for a reason. Why not Europe or why not
Yeah, so
Canada?
yeah, almost, I would say almost. I mean, everything I said is almost true, but almost all Iranians that could not get into Iranian universities. The Iranian universities, first of all, Iran is extremely educated country. I mean, even the
Mhm.
taxi drivers knows everything, and I gave that in my first interview with Paul. So everybody is very educated, right? And and but their universities are very difficult to get into, and those who get into it are just really awesome kids that know everything, right? So Iran does not have the capacity at that time, did not have the capacity to educate everybody beyond a bachelor's degree. So most of the Iranians would come to the United States. If they could come to the United States, I would say 90% of the people would come to the United States. Those who couldn't come would go to France and other countries,
So
you name it, they would go somewhere else. But mostly their preference was the United States. And engineering, we all wanted to go to MIT. And there is a lot of us who went to both of my brother-in-law. I have two brother-in-laws, both MIT PhDs, right? I didn't go to MIT. I came there. I told Paul the reason why I came to Tennessee. So, so everybody wanted to come to the United States, got a master's, PhD, and go back to Iran. A lot of us stayed. Some people went back to Iran. So that's the way things shaped.
So you saw America as the best place to go to for higher education.
Exactly.
Okay, and that was
it still is.
And so for you, it was. I think you got your bachelor's in Iran, and then you came to the United States to get further education, and you felt like this was the country to do it.
Exactly.
Interesting. Where'd you go to school?
I have been to, I went to University of Tennessee, got my master's, but Paul went through all of these. I actually have gone 3 doctorate degrees from 3 different countries, one from the United States, one from Sweden, and one from Canada. I went to Western in London, Canada, and got a PhD in computer engineering from there. I got a Doctor of Engineering degree in electrical engineering from University of Texas, and then I have a PhD in nuclear engineering from University of Sweden. So,
wow,
but my master's degree is from University of Tennessee here in Knoxville.
Okay, so what year did you come to the United States?
1974.
1974, and then have you ever been to the United States prior to when you came?
No,
here?
but my parents used to. So my sister was here.
Okay.
For about, I would say, 5 years before I came, maybe more, 6 years. My aunt was here. My mom's sister was here for probably 10 years. She lives in Knoxville. She's a PhD biology. She's also very highly educated, got a couple of master's degrees, a PhD and postdoctorate and all that stuff. My sister came here and became an architect and went back to Iran and lived there most of her life in Iran. What was your question? I forgot.
Yeah. So maybe the next question is, I'm just curious, when you first got here, what were some of the things you noticed that were different about the United States?
Well,
your home
I actually
country?
made a presentation last week to a bunch of PhDs and postdoctorate nuclear people that they asked me to talk about. I have a very funny presentation. So I have a brother that is one of my jokes, actually. So he was here when I came, and they say that person who picks you up from the airport and takes you to the dorm or apartment and all, and hangs out with you in the United States that first 3 weeks is the one who sets your destiny. And which was my brother, younger than me. He works for me now, and he is the worst person to come to as a person who's going to try to set that 3 weeks of forming you on for your future. So I flew from Paris, France, And Iran was an extremely modern country at that time, and it still is. I lived in a very cosmopolitan city, Tehran, which was the capital. Then I went to Paris. I was there for a few weeks with my friends, and then came to United States, flew to Houston, Texas. And I always thought United States or all these big buildings, like that was my view of the United States, New York type, tall buildings, a lot of lights. My brother knew that that's what I was expecting. And so he took me directly to Beaumont, Texas. That is really,
Yeah, I know Beaumont.
I
Yeah.
keep saying, where's the big tall buildings in the way? He said, wait till we get to Beaumont. Beaumont at that time just had one 3-story building. That was the tallest building. So he's a guy that if he knows you want to see something or do something, he'll make sure you don't see it. So that's my story about that. But of course, I did not stay in Beaumont. I stayed there 6 months and got out of there and came here to Tennessee.
Very nice. Very nice. So, earlier you mentioned the Constitution, being a really strong framework for how this country operates. And you said it was a very powerful document. Today there's a argument from many that that's not the case. I mean, just give me your thoughts on that and why did you mention that earlier?
Right. Well, so the argument is that that thing is written so long ago and doesn't apply to today's life. Some of that is and that's why there is Supreme Court and there are things to interpret it, and that's there are provisions to deviate from the Constitution. But I think the reason, in spite of all these differences between, you look at this country is almost divided in half. One thing this way. It's been like this forever. Look at the budget. We just don't have a budget. We just keep on renewing the same thing, right? Because we can't agree on that, right? You look at all these kind of things and you say, well, what? There got to be some reason why this place doesn't fall apart and that's because the foundation is very strong. Now, not to say that there's nothing in the Constitution that does not apply to today's society. There is, there are things that if those founders were living in today's life, they would write things a little bit differently, right?
Sure.
But there are provisions to kind of, amend that and do things. But I think, and there are views that are different than me. But I think the reason the place is so solidly making progress. Now, there are challenges to the United States today. China is doing a lot to compete and they're not winning yet, but they're really on their way to really become another very big force today. As you know, everybody think of the United States and the president of the United States, the commander of the world and those kind of things. So there are challenges to US and you look at China, again, you were asking me about a supreme leader type thing. Why is that good? And look, that's another country. It is sort of Western or more Western looking government than Eastern, but the president of China is very, very powerful. And look at that country. That country is, and they always say, you guys go over here and fight with everybody you can and do all these things. We are going to just don't do any of that and grow our country. And there's a truth to that. The United States get involved in a lot of things. Those guys don't. Those guys just stick to their stuff. And they are not very good about trading with us because everything you do for them the second time they'll already copy it. But that's the way we work there.
Sure.
They told us we are going to buy it the first time, but we're going to copy it, and they did.
So Hash, if we can fast forward here to what you're doing today. Obviously you came to the United States for higher education. I think you still believe, the United States is the pillar for higher education globally. Sounds like you're extremely well educated, not only here in the United States, but abroad. Fast forward, what kind of business are you running today?
So I'm a nuclear engineering company. So for non-nuclear engineers, what we do, we verify the operation of the control systems of nuclear power plants. So what we do, most of it is regulated. Plants have to do it to be able to continue to operate. otherwise the government will not let them operate. So we are like a doctor. Every plant, once every couple of years, have to do some testing to make sure that if something went bad in the nuclear core, the plant will shut itself down fast enough before an accident starts in progress, right? So we go verify that that's actually the systems are working good enough so that this plant will shut itself down quickly in case of a problem in the reactor, nuclear reactor core. So that's basically what my company does. And we do that. There's 100 nuclear power plants, almost 100 nuclear power plants in the United States, generating 20% of US electricity. Wow. So we do all of them. And then there's a bunch of plants in other countries, such as China, France, England, Switzerland, even Slovenia, Slovakia, and all those that we actually do business in and do the same thing. So that's what my company does.
Very nice. Very nice. Hey, let me ask you, if you were to if you were to start a company similar to the one here in the United States in Iran, do you think you'd have the same amount of success? I'm just curious how business friendly it is there versus here.
I couldn't say that. I don't know today. And when I left Iran, I was too young to know, but I couldn't answer that question because I don't know the difference, what would happen in Iran today, because I haven't been there for 45, 50 years almost. But I can tell you this, I don't think anyone can argue with this. This is the place for an immigrant to be successful. There is no place else that provides you with the same opportunities that the United States does. That's really, really true. I actually was going to go work in France. And if I worked in France, I am almost sure that even if I did the same thing, followed the same path, I would not have been as successful as I was in the United States. All this stuff you hear about, they discriminate and they do this. None of that is true with me. I don't think there's any of that. I never saw. I'm an Iranian guy. Iran is not very much liked by the U.S. government. I mean, I can't say that, but it's not very popular to be from Iran. You rather be from Italy or France. I'm very proud to be from Iran, but it's easier to deal with it. But I never think that if I was Italian or French or German or Canadian, anything better would have happened to me. So I don't believe that. And also, one other thing I got to tell you, everybody complains about the education system of the United States. It's very true that it's very easy in the early time. But look, the best doctors in the world are the American doctors. All right. So I always, Derek, I look at the result. I don't care about the process, right? If your company is running fantastically, making good money, it's an honest company, doing everything right, and nothing else matters. I mean, these young kids come and go and find so many things wrong with the way you do things. So look at the results, right? So look at the results of the United States education system. Best doctors in the world. So any king or anybody in the world that gets cancer or whatever, they want to come to the United States and go to Mayo Clinic, right? So that's one thing. That's for sure. Nobody can argue with that, including Chinese people, including all these things, right? Then you look at the technology. All the best technology of the world comes from the United States. Look at iPhone. This iPhone, right? Nobody has come up with something as good as this, right? And look at the software technology. Look at all this high technology. Then you hear all these things. Oh, our kids are behind. We are number 43. Look, Korea, kids go to school 6 days a week, right? And I've heard this is again hearsay. I do business in Korea. I know Korea. I have a lot of Korean friends. They're wonderful people, very hardworking, right? But at the end of the day, they are very modern and progressive country. I'm talking about South Korea, right? And they have built a country in 50 years that is amazing. Nevertheless, if you compare that with the United States, their kids study 3 times as hard, 3 times as long, but US. So the education system of this country at the end really works very well. But in the process, you can see a lot of problems and bitch about everything. And I think the teachers have to be paid a lot more than they do. But other than that, I think the final result is the best in the world. No question about it. We have the largest number of Nobel Prizes than any per capita than any other country by far.
Yeah. So hey, this is great stuff because I completely agree with you. You know, I guess my question is this: you talked about business in the United States, best place for opportunity, could have lived other places. Educational system, you mentioned the institution of education in the United States as being the best among several other topics. Why do you think that is? Like, what's the underlying reason why the results are so good in a lot of those different areas?
Because the high school, so if you take a high school graduate of the United States and a high school graduate of Iran, there's no comparison. The Iranian graduate will know a lot more and a lot of knowledge, a lot more. So generally Americans as a public are not as educated as other countries. Like you go to Europe, people in the train are reading books and stuff, right? You go to Iran, the taxi driver knows the politics of the United States better than you and I do, right?
Sure.
Not you and I, but most people, right? And everything else. So generally, the United States are less educated because this is an island away from everything else, and people don't bother to learn this. But it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. So when you come out of high school, you're almost below many other countries, right? But then as you go to graduate school, because of the facilities, because of the freedom, because of the way system is run, I mean, you're given the opportunity to be innovative. You're not micromanaged and things. For example, when I was going to nuclear engineering department, they instilled honestly to us significantly. They believed in us. For example, they would give us the test and would leave. And of course, some people cheat and we talk to each other. Everybody does that. But that made us honest. That made us really feel like, you know, they are not policing us. So there is some way the American higher education system works that makes you innovative. Doesn't put you in a jail, looks like you're a thief, you're going to steal everything and all. Gives you this freedom to be innovative. This gives you this freedom to learn to be honest. Okay, you can cheat all you want and get a degree and go do nothing. If you want to do that, be my guest. There are PhDs that don't know shit, don't know anything, right? Yeah. And things. But by and large, in the graduate school and all, you want to become a doctor in the United States, they grill you to death. There's no way an American MD, medical doctor, could be stupid because they won't let you get an MD.
Yeah.
You know? The other degrees you can get by with it, but there's some of the things. That's why. Look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk came from Canada, as you know. The guy is not even 50 years old. Look what he's been able to do. It's amazing. You cannot do that anywhere else. I mean, South African, I think he grew up in Canada. That's little I know. Came here, the guy is not even 50 years old. His company is worth more than General Motors.
So you think, so no, that's good. And I think that's what I'm getting at. You said it's like, the freedom around innovation in the educational system,
exactly.
The lack of micromanagement, the lack of the lack of things that may detract from being innovative and learning and growing, and same in the business sector. Sounds like the freedoms we have in this country to go build a business without a ton of intervention from opposing forces is just much different. Like you said, I mean, Elon Musk I mean, if you think of the billionaires in this country, they've all built businesses by themselves as one and grow them into multinational corporations. And now they're making it. And I guess you can't do that everywhere because of the freedoms we have here in the country.
There is no models of this anywhere else. You tell me of Elon Musk in any other country, or Steve Jobs, or Bill Gates, or I mean, you don't. I mean, look at how these guys, or even this British guy, the other guy that did the space thing. I forgot his name.
Richard Branson.
Yeah. So he's British, and I think he lives partly in the United States. But anyway, you look at these people, and I mean, he did his space stuff in this country, right? I mean, Branson did. So you look at what Branson and Steve and Elon Musk have done compared to NASA. So I don't like to
Yeah.
to complain about NASA. I work for them too, and they are a great organization. They are the instigator of all these innovations. But look, these two guys came after NASA could not do what these guys did in 10 years, in probably 50 years.
Unbelievable.
Private enterprise is amazing in this country. I mean, if you look at what these two guys sent, people into space, just with ketchup and tomato, basically, technology, and they got it done. They had some failures, but they came back and redid it again. I finally got these two things to go into space very successfully.
Yeah.
It's amazing, amazing.
So we're coming to the end of the time here, Hash, and I'm going to ask you kind of two questions.
Sure.
Okay. And then we can close down the call. But, the first question is, if someone is to ask you, in a short response, one word, what makes this country so great, and why do people continuously want to come here? And a lot, by the way, risk a lot to come here. But if someone asked you that question, why the United States? I mean, what would your answer be?
Because my answer is very simple. If you are hardworking, honest guy, and just do your thing, this is the best place. Being from another country, none of that those are just BS stuff that people who are not successful make up. Look, I'm an example of that. I wasn't very smart. I was just very hardworking, dedicated, and and I felt like, they let me in, they gave me the education, and they gave me the opportunity to build a business. I'm very loyal, and I'm very grateful and privileged. And I think if you're a hardworking guy, you have to have some street smarts. So sometimes you can be very hard. You got to have some education too. So even that, I mean, I know a Spanish guy that worked for me that didn't have any education, but he was very hardworking. He bought a house 10, 15 years ago. He sent his kids to college and everything else. So hard work. The thing that really guarantees you success in this country, hard work with combination of a little bit of education and some good common sense.
Yeah, completely agree. And then my last question is, what do you say to those today that that have a ton of apathy for the country? This, the American dream is dead. You used to be able to come here and be successful and do all the things that America afforded you, but today you can't. What do you say?
That's not true. That's not true at all. That's not true. The only thing that worries me is China competing with the United States. And getting ahead because we are distracted in other stuff more so than other countries. So that's the only thing that I think is a threat to the United States, being the top, staying on the top. But all of these things you say is not true. I mean, there are kids. We have 10 companies with very young people, and half of them are immigrant in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah,
they call them tech stars, and they're all thriving. I have a little nephew who got his PhD in mechanical engineering, immediately became billionaire. Tomorrow, I'm going to a wedding in San Diego of one of my nephews, sort of thing. This guy's dad came to the United States, and within 10 years, he sold his first company for over $1 billion. This is an Iranian guy that came to the United States. In 10 years, he sold the company over $1 billion. And that was after the revolution, when Iranians were not liked yet. So those are examples of this stuff is all BS. There is no impediment to, if you're lazy and want to and not focused, you're not going to get anywhere here. So that's another good thing about it. The people who are lazy, the reason people like us that's one thing I got to tell you there. One of the reasons immigrants like you and I are successful, because these domestic people, these indigenous people, do not appreciate what this country offers in opportunities. They take it for granted. We come over here and so shit. You can do anything here if you just work hard and get along. Those people who have been here don't see that because they've been here all the time. Their parents have been here. So when we come here, we see the opportunity a lot better than indigenous people. That might be another reason why most of, not all immigrants are successful, but a lot of us who come with some education are all making it in the United States.
Yeah. Well, and I'll close on this, because I think what you're saying is accurate, and I hear it frequently. You know, the first generation immigrant is hungry. The first generation immigrant is willing to put in the work. The first generation immigrant, you know, isn't entitled to anything. The first generation immigrant comes here to this country, is very grateful for being here because of all the opportunities from an educational perspective, from a business perspective, from just all the freedoms that are afforded. They put in the effort, and look, a lot of first generation immigrants and immigrants in general help build this country for those reasons. And in return, I think America has blossomed. I mean, think of the innovation and think of the ideas and the businesses that have sprouted in the United States from the first generation immigrant coming here and taking advantage of those opportunities. So I agree. And it's, you know, I hear the same things over and over again from people like you that came to this country. It's, you know, it's hard work, dedication, and taking advantage of what's in front of you. And you can be successful. You can earn a fantastic income. You can be a positive contributor to society. And look, you get to bring a lot of culture. You get to bring a lot of diversity to America, which is great as well. So Hash, this was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you sharing your story. Very enlightening for me and for the viewers. I can only imagine. So thanks for your time, and thanks for sharing your story.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much, Derek.
Thank you, Hash.